Podcast, and I'm joined by my dad. I imagine a face that everyone recognizes by now and a voice as well.
I
And
hope so.
I hope so too. We've been doing it now for a while. How I guess two plus years. It's crazy how time
Two
flies.
years. Yeah, we
2 years.
actually pulled a video a couple days ago that was 2 years old.
Wow,
So yeah, it's
it's pretty
pretty
cool.
impressive.
Pretty cool, and it's pretty cool. We're almost at 4,000 followers, subscribers, I should say. And that's just on YouTube. The other channels also have several hundreds or thousands even. So pretty amazing what we've been able to do. Kind of, I don't know if it's sheer luck or divine providence or a mix of both, but it's pretty cool where we are. And one of the things, really, what we wanted to talk about today, and we appreciate everyone being live. We don't figure to have a big audience. It's early in the morning there in the States, afternoon here in Germany. But for everyone who's here, thank you very much for joining us. What we want to talk about is we recently had a trailer called Indefectible. I think probably many of you watched that trailer and hopefully got excited by it and seeing that we want to tell a story. I'd almost say we want to tell the story of the last 100 years or 70 years, I suppose you could say, kind of what has happened since Vatican II, maybe a little bit before. And I know there's a lot of people like, yeah, come on, how are you going to do that? It's too much, too controversial, et cetera, et cetera. And it is a massive, massive undertaking. And I think that's part of what we want to talk about today. We want to set expectations. We want to, ask for some help because it is a huge project, but it's one that we think is really, really valuable and could be groundbreaking and even game changing. So I think that, Dad, I'm going to send it over to you now because it's really your baby, it's your mastermind, and maybe tell us what is Indefectible or what will it be.
Well, sure. And let me cue up first. I'll start with a little bit of a misperception because in the comment we had some wonderful comments in the comment section of the trailer. Excellent trailer that and a lot of people were saying, "Wow, this is so cool. When is the full documentary coming out?" And the misperception, and I think this is partly on me. I think I allowed this out there. There actually is no there is no final product imminent at this point. This is not a trailer in the sense of, okay, the documentary itself is going to be out within 2 months or whatever it is. It was really more of a trailer that was meant to say, we're starting this project, we're starting down this road, and the final product, and I'll get into some dynamics of how long it's going to be for us to take. I mean, the length is for us is not really that important. It's more the quality that we're getting after. But unfortunately, the final take is not. Although and I'm going to talk about this as well as we get into it. There we are going to have. It's going to be a gradual, ongoing process. So you're going to see the basically the Indefectible brand starting to take some shape and starting to grow as time goes, and it's going to develop, and you're going to watch it develop. And I think it's going to be a really neat thing. So it's not just a final documentary; it's going to be an entire long, perhaps years long series of videos and artistic representations and all that. So let's get into what is Indefectible. And really the short answer is actually in the subheading of the trailer, subheading of what we're doing. It's a documentary that's meant to show how the true church has survived the great apostasy. And it's meant to be through storytelling, through anecdotal type stories. And I like to use this analogy. Let's suppose for just a minute, I mean, in this alternate universe, imagine for a minute that the technology existed back in the days of the Roman martyrs. And we were able to see them living day to day. What was under Roman occupation? How imminent was your potential arrest or execution for being a Christian? I know there are legends about how Christians used to take and tattoo a fish before the cross was the official symbol of the church. They would tattoo a fish on their wrists, and the speculation is because when the Roman soldiers came to their house and asked them if they were Christian, they did not want the ability to back out, to wimp out and say no, and they wanted to have the courage of their convictions, and so they would add that tattoo. But these are all the kind of things. Imagine if we had that as a legacy passed down from the Roman days. It would be just one of the most fascinating things you can imagine. But then when you fast forward 2,000 years or so, here we are today in a situation that is in a lot of ways worse than what they had in the Roman martyr day. I mean, at least there you had black and white, you had Christian, non-Christian, you had persecution, death, and all these things. Here we live in the most horrible times imaginable worldwide. I would imagine that the days that we see, the darkness of the days that we see, have played out in local regions over and over and over again. However, it's never been this bad worldwide, and more to the point, we've never had the church be the enemy of Catholics, or the official, what appears to be the church in Rome, be the enemy of Catholics. And so that's what's unique today. And what we want to be able to do is tell the story of how the church has survived through that, because it's an incredibly fascinating story.
Well, and real quick, if I can jump in, Dad, because I think that's something that I've had several people say, hey, this is a bad idea. You know, the history is really pretty icky. You know, there's a lot of, it's pretty shady. A lot of bad things happened. And I think that's actually one of the most fascinating parts of it, that I think, and it's true. We can't deny that there are a lot of parts and a lot of people who failed, or who went off in the wrong direction. But what's beautiful to see is how God worked through these men and women to pass on the torch, to pass on the church and tradition.
Right.
And even if these people eventually went off, even if they went off the deep end, they still played their part. They played their key. They were a key part in this puzzle that has, as you said, that has kept the faith alive. And I think it's a really fascinating story. And I think it's not something we should be afraid of. We shouldn't just say, it's all kind of gross. It's all bad. So let's just, no. And I think it's important to tell the story. And sometimes you got to tell the ugly parts too.
Right. And I think that there will be a little bit of that. We'll make sure that as we go through, some of the dark, and I'll talk about in just a second here, you've got some dark days, especially in the early 1980s and whatnot, the 9 priests breaking off from Econe. You've got Bishop Schuchard in Spokane and things like that. And I think we'll make sure that we only take those stories as far as the clergy are comfortable with us taking them, because there are some bad details in there. But I think that more to the point, what you're going to see coming out is these stories of heroism and stories of hardship and how long it took people to get to Mass. And before I get into the history, here's one example I was thinking of last night that kind of tells a little bit more of the story that we're hoping to tell with Indefectible. So future generations, and really this documentary is one of the things that when I first conceived of the Indefectible documentary, one of the things I was thinking is, hey, this would be a great outreach tool to non-Catholics or to Novus Ordos or whatnot. And we had a little steering committee at the time. And somebody on that, and I think I knew who it was, but I won't name him or her, but somebody on that committee basically made a game-changing point to me. They said, you know what? Those people who are not in Sedative content and not of our mindset, not in the church, they're stuck in the Novus Ordo or whatever it is. These people they are who they are. God may lead them in. They might find their way. But let's take this documentary and make this as something that we can give to future generations to look back, because future generations are going to see how things were in the 20 teens and the 2020s and whatnot. And they're going to marvel, because they're going to say, how did anybody save his or her soul during this time? And especially with the church having turned down. And that's the story we want to tell. So I'll tell a real quick one and then kind of get into a little bit how this came about. So one of the stories that we know that's going to come down from years from now is a discussion of COVID and how COVID shut everything down, and how the Novus Ordo Church basically shut its doors, and so many of the Novus Ordo priests treated the whole thing like a vacation, and it was a scandal, and it's so negative. But for us in Omaha, it was a really cool story that the mayor of Omaha, who herself was a Novus Ordo Catholic and really kind of anti-traditional, and she saw her own church's shutting their doors, and she couldn't, for First Amendment reasons, actually shut down churches. So what she decided to do, she decided she'd get really smart, and she forbade communion from being distributed in Omaha. So we got you, Bishop Hiverunis. And so what the bishop did, he perfectly stayed within the rules and the letter of the law. He would offer mass for 10 people at a time, or 10 people per room, or whatever the legality was at the time in Omaha. And then he would have a separate communion service just over the border, about 20 minutes away, just over the border in Iowa and Honey Creek. And so for us, it was an incredible experience for us, because we had a couple of Sundays in there where we were able to turn on a mass on TV that was going on in Idaho. I think it started at 11 o'clock our time. And we were able to watch that mass and then stop the mass, just put it on pause at communion, walk down the street about a quarter of a mile, wait for a little while, and with the group, the rest of the group, and then have communion. I think it was Father Cepeda, who was then a deacon, and then Father McGuire, who's then a deacon, would offer communion. We would walk back and we would watch the rest of Mass. And so here was basically God's back to that mayor of Omaha. And it was a beautiful solution to this problem of how do you continue to have communion during COVID. So there are so many stories just like that one, that these are the stories that I think we really want to have as part of Indefectible. And so I wanted to go through a little bit of a history of where this concept came from to begin with. I actually sat down one day and wanted to create a podcast of the history of sedevacantism. And I've got a background in project management. And there's a concept in project management known as the project life cycle. And the project life cycle is 4 stages. It's called forming, storming, norming, and performing. Those are the 4 stages of the project life cycle. I thought that through. Is it related to our movement and the Remnant Church since Vatican II? And I thought, it really fit pretty well. You had a forming stage in the 1960s into the 1970s where you had the Blue Army up in Spokane. You had Father Gomer DePaul. You had Father Francis, Father, I can't think of his, Father Francis in Colorado. Fenton, Father Francis Fenton. Yeah. And you had these different breakaway priests, and they all kind of were working by themselves, and they're creating new ground, and they were the trailblazers and all that. It was a forming period for the church. Then by the 1980s came a storming period. We talked about it a little bit. There was some scandal, but I mean, more to the point, this was a growth period for the church. You had the 9 priests in Icone, 1983, who broke off from Archbishop Lefebvre and came and had a huge impact on the church here in the United States. You had the turmoil in Spokane and then the turnover and Bishop Shukar being physically removed from the property in Spokane, and a new day dawned for the CMRI by 1991. Then Bishop Hiverunis was consecrated a bishop and started things on the path that we saw today, and that was kind of our storming period. Then a norming period, which I think was an incredibly fascinating period of the movement here, was into the 1990s and 2000s, where you had the advent and the takeoff of the internet. And what happened during this period, I think you still had groups that were not working particularly well together. I mean, I use ourselves as an example. At least at that time, I was basically a moral agnostic. I was born with good morality, but without religion. And Lisa was in a school here in Colorado with Father Eugene Berry, one of the 9. And at that point, it was a small school, about 20 students. There was one other boy her age who was really not marriageable. She had no other prospects. There were no other churches that really got along well. There was nowhere else she could go even to look. There was no internet. There was no anything else at that point in the late 80s. And so she ended up going to college, probably the worst thing she could have done, and found me, and the rest is history. But from there into the 90s and 2000s, you had the internet grow up, and the thing that happened, the first thing that happened, I think, was the mothers started getting together, and they formed groups, and they formed groups across tribes, you might say. So they really didn't really care that you were SSPV and you were CMRI and you were with Bishop Sanborn or SGG or whatever. They didn't care about any of those politics. They didn't care about the Took consecration. They didn't care about the 1990 to 1955 liturgical reform. They just cared about raising children or drinking coffee or having a good chat, or whatever it was that was the subject matter of the day, the calendar of the saints, all these important types of things that women talk about. And that was, I call it the norming period, when things started to gel. And at about the same time, you had Father Chikata, you had Bishop Pivarunas, I think both, who were very much committed to unity in the church. Father Chikata created the young adult gathering and started to bring in young adults from across the different groups, and started to create some harmony amongst the groups. So instead of these separate warring tribes, which was the reputation we had in the 80s and 90s, now we started to work together, which brings us to the final epoch of our great movement, which is the performing period. And so you look at today, you fast forward to today, and now we have our own media, we have our own churches, we have Novus Ordo Watch and WM Review and the Catholic Wire and all these different outlets for media. But more to the point, we have sisters and we have convents and we have schools and we have the Catholic life. And that's, I think, one of the points that I want to make with Indefectible is that historically, when you look at what we as a movement, and you look at traditional Catholic all across the this is the Remnant, this is the SSPX, this is 1 Peter 5, all the different groups. One of the main focuses of attention with all these traditional groups is, oh, woe is us, look what they've taken from us, look how terrible these popes are, and basically that kind of becomes our identity. Is here's what it used to be, here's what they've taken away from us, and here's how angry we are about it. Well, I think that as our group has evolved and as we've gotten into what I would call this performing stage of the project management life cycle, we've now gotten to the point where we're beyond that. That is what it is. The Francis is who he is, and we don't really pay him much of a never mind. We are looking at how do we preserve the Catholic faith? How do we live the Catholic calendar? How do we comport ourselves as Catholic? How do we live as Catholic? The cadence of being a Catholic. And I think that that's a lot of what we're trying to pull with Indefectible is, yes, we're going to be looking at the history. Yes, this is kind of a historical look backwards. And yes, we're going to have a storyboard for it. And yes, there are going to be, some touchy stories along the way that we'll probably be able to tell. But it's really more, how have we gotten to where we are today? And oh my goodness, look, right under everybody's nose, the church, God has preserved his church, and this church actually functions and is actually Catholic today.
Well, and it's pretty cool from what we've already been able to do. We've already done, I don't know, 10, 12 interviews. And
yeah,
I got to do 4 interviews with sisters at the CMD in Omaha over the winter, over Christmas time. And what was fascinating is that they all were in different eras. There was an older sister, a kind of a middle sister. They're kind of there was one of each parts of what you're talking about, at least 4 of those parts. Kind of and I think that was really interesting to be able to see and to talk to them and get their different perspectives and their different life stories, what they went through. And that's kind of, again, that's kind of how we want to tell it too, right? We want to tell what happened, but also through the eyes of people who actually experienced it, rather than just, as you say, going and complaining about it all the, constantly. This is what's happened, rather, hey, this is, yeah, we lived through this, but this is what is, I suppose, or what was. And I think we get, because if we get so hyperbolic, I think, and I think you and I, or whoever, especially on social media, you start making judgments and saying, one guy says Archbishop Lefebvre was a saint, and the next guy says Archbishop Lefebvre is in hell,
Right.
and it's like, well, come on, guys, it is one or the other. That's probably true, or he's in purgatory, of course, one of the three options. But that's not how we should communicate. That's not how we tell the story.
Right.
And I think that's what our goal would be, to not make these decisions on our own, I suppose, and say, this is the story we're going to tell.
Right. And we still have, we still have people out there in our movement who personally knew Archbishop Lefebvre, who knew Bishop Delorier, who knew Archbishop Took, Bishop Carmona. And in fact, it's an interview I really, really want to do. I think it's, I want to say it's Father Borja's grandmother, who was a custodian for Bishop Carmona, knew him personally. And that's what, I mean, that's part of what we want to do, is be able to bring these three-dimensional characters to life, and from hearing the stories from people who actually knew them. It's the anecdotal side of things that I think is really exciting here.
Well, exactly. And I know a priest here who is he's a Sede Vacantis priest, and his house is called Casa Lefebvre.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, yeah. And I mean, and so it just shows you, we tend to try to think, especially again on social media, we think of things in black and white, and we think this is what I know. I know this to be the case. Archbishop Lefebvre was so bad for Sede Vacantis. It's like, yeah, again, sure, there's a lot of, but there's so much nuance. And I think, as you say, if we can get that story to be told, not through our perspective, who didn't live through it, but through people who knew him, who actually met Archbishop Lefebvre or Bishop Carmona. And I think, and we have to do it now. That's why this is so important, because a lot of these people are getting older and are dying. That's simply the case. Many of them are getting past the time where they're going to be able to tell these stories. And that's part of why I think it's so important to do it now.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a bit later, about, how much work it is and how hard it is, and why, someone just asked in the comment section, when will the project be released? And we honestly don't know. We'll talk about that a bit later, but again, we don't know, because it's a huge project, and it's something that we want to do well rather than quickly.
Right. And I do think that if we can get everything together, we will start to roll things out simply. And I'll excuse me, I'll make one. I'm working right now on basically an intro and an exit for little episodes. And so I think as we go, one of the things I have queued up right now, I actually have three ideas that I'm putting out there, and these will come out, I think, relatively imminently. One is, we have an interview that our good friend of the podcast, Kieran Brennan, was in Argentina. I think when was it, last summer? And he did an interview with the new Bishop Espina. Bishop Espina is so charming. It's a wonderful, wonderful interview. And so I think I may go ahead and play that interview in its entirety, and we'll put it under the Indefectible brand, and probably just kind of play it as is, more or less. It was really good. Now, and that's probably the first one that we'll put out. Now, there's a couple others that I'm going to just barely getting started on. The main one is there's a priest up in Canada. I forget his name now. I know Father Saunders talked about him, and Sister Jacinta talked about him, but he literally covered all of Canada every week with Mass. It was, I mean, we have amazing stories of priests doing epic journeys and epic Mass routes on Sundays, and this one put them all to shame. And so I want to take that. Now, what I want to do is do a little expose on this particular priest, and and tell it from the perspective of Father Saunders and Sister Jacinta and others, and we'll start to give it a little bit more of a graphical feel to it, and some storytelling, and maybe put some music behind it, and a narrator and a story and all that kind of stuff. And so little by little, we want to take these vignettes. I don't call them vignettes because that's, I think, what Indefectible is meant to be, is vignettes. Eventually we might have an entire episode on Mount St. Michael's, on the building there. Who knows? You got so many different possibilities here, but I want to work on a first vignette because we have a lot of the material for it already on this Canadian priest, and kind of turn it into a little proof of concept of what Indefectible will become. But instead of saving it for years or whatever it is for this final documentary, we'll actually put this out there as something that is part of Indefectible. So it's going to be an ongoing feature, maybe a couple of months that we'll put out there as part of the regular podcast. So, and on the note, Kevin, on the note, here's a fascinating story that I wanted to tell. We're talking about the elderly and how we want to get these stories relatively quickly.
Sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, real quickly. I was just Googling his name. It's Father Normandin. He wrote a book called Pastor Out in the Cold. You can actually find that on Angelus Press. So sorry, I was looking that up because I couldn't remember his name, but Father Normandin. But anyway, sorry.
Norman. Okay. And what we might be able to do too is one of the things we have in mind is a little bit like Ken Burns' The Civil War series. We want to have guest narrators. So if we can find somebody who, ideally, if they had a Canadian accent, that could read Pastor Out in the Cold and read some key segments from it and pull some of his, we'll put music behind it. We'll put imagery. We'll put some interviews with Father Saunders and Sister Jacinta, and I think there may even be another one out there. Holly and Mandy. Right. I think that their parents may have talked about that, and the Picards. So that's, I think, basically how we're going to do this. Is we're going to start to put these little vignettes together, and then once we have enough vignettes where we feel like, okay, we can make a full documentary out of this, we'll go with it. So now, real quickly on the elderly and getting these stories while we can. Here's kind of a powerful story that Bill Meese was talking about a couple times. I think on his he did an interview over the winter, which we'll try to we'll get out there. He talked a little bit about he talked about being kidnapped by his family, and he just made a little bit of allusion to it. Well, we were at dinner with him a few months ago, and he tells this full story about how literally his family found out he was Sedevacantists, had broken away from the Novus Ordo Church. They kidnapped him. They blindfolded him, put him in a car, took him to a warehouse, and tried to deprogram him. Right, and so he was able to kind of break free. He got out and found an address. He didn't know where he was, but he found an address, and he called Dan Hansen. Dan Hansen worked for a plane company and was able to hire a plane and go look for him flying around. I mean, this thing sounded like this junior high school type of mystery. And so anyways, he got through it. And he's telling the story. He's laughing hysterically. We're all laughing hysterically. It's a funny story. And I said, Bill, we got to get this. We got to get the story, documented. We got to hear the full story for the world to see. And he's like, yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Well, sadly, three or 4 weeks later, he passed away. And so that story now in its entirety, told in the first, and we could probably get Dan Hansen's view of it, but told in the first person with the most power from Bill Meese, who did it. We'll never hear it now. And there are others in the Sedevacantists movement who have had the same thing happen, that they were kidnapped, literally kidnapped. Archbishop Took, we know the story from Father Francis Miller of how he was kidnapped and taken to New York and basically drugged or removed, he had his drugs taken away that he needed to survive. And so, I mean, you could almost do an entire episode on kidnapped if you wanted, And so but these stories are out there. These are the kinds of stories that we really want to hear. We'd like to hear we drove 3 hours to mass on Sunday and back, and things like that, and all that. But it really, another fascinating story, and I'll just because I want to kind of whet up people's appetite and give them a feel for what we're looking for story wise. There's a priest that we all know, and probably you'll recognize the story, Kevin. They drive these horrendous these horrendous circuits on the weekend. This one priest drove one of the worst. I think it goes down to Oklahoma and back to Omaha every weekend. And he was late at night, and he was falling asleep at the wheel. Didn't really realize it, and he felt basically nodded off at the wheel. And he's jolted awake. He looks out the window, and there's a deer running beside the car. And it jolted him awake, and he kind of got back and he yelled a little burst of adrenaline. He was okay after that. And he's like, wait a minute, I'm going 75 miles an hour. How fast can a deer go? So he went home and he looked it up, and a deer's maximum speed was like 30 miles an hour. And so, I mean, this was absolutely a miracle that happened with him. And, and to hear somebody like that tell that story is just incredible. It's all these little vignettes, all these neat little stories that make up how the church has survived. And there's so much heroism out there that people, I think, don't even really realize is heroic. And that's why I think what we want to try to do is get as many of these stories as we can out there.
Well, and I think that's something that again, I think that one of the misconceptions is that, we've got this it's all filmed, it's all done, we're just waiting to produce it. And it's just not the case. I mean, really part of what we want is, this is right now, basically a 3-person team. There are others who join in and who help out, when they can and help out a little bit. So I guess you can make it maybe 10 absolute max, but I think what we really want is, we know these stories are all over the world. And there's so many that we don't know. We just obviously can't know them because, well, we haven't heard from everyone. So I think that's part of what we really want. And we got a little bit of bites, I suppose you could say, from the trailer, but not as much as we would have liked, because we do want people emailing in and saying, hey, I've got a great story, or I know a priest, or my grandfather did this, and this. And I think that's how we want to tell the story. Now, we do know lots of people. I have a lot of connections, obviously, with priests who have great stories, and we'll be able to do it no matter what. But we know the bigger the pool, the better the fish, right? And we're going to have better stories if more people, try to submit them and try to help us out. And I think that's another point we want to get across here, that if you have a story, if it's a little miracle, if it's you survived for 20 years in the attic of your home having mass once a month, let us know. Send me an email. I think right now that's not true. I think we have an official email for Indefectible. Right?
It's interviews@indefectible.org. Yeah, a friend of the podcast, Dan, has been really good about setting us up with a domain. So we actually own indefectible.org. At some point or another, I think we'd like to build out a website. I haven't gotten there yet. But interviews@indefectible.org. And let us know about your story. And, ideally, okay, so just from an interview standpoint, I'm going to talk about the interviews here, because one of the things we're finding is that these interviews are a lot more difficult than you would think they would be. The technology is difficult. The lighting is difficult. The background, and making sure that all these things come together. And then, if you can get everything right technically, you can get the look right, then asking the right questions is difficult. It's a challenge. And I know that if you watch the trailer again, there's a couple interviews in there, one with Dan Hansen and one with Bill Meese, and both of them just didn't go very well. But we were able to extract something for the trailer. But with Bill, basically, we had everything going. This was terrible. He was starting to tell this incredible story about this lady who had wanted to go home to die in Spokane, and they put her on a plane, and it was just an incredible story. Right in the middle of the story, my phone the battery on my camera went dead, and I didn't have a backup. And so we had to shut it down, and we said, hey, we'll come back and we'll finish that story. And we never got around to it.
I did though, Dad. I went back. So I got that story. So no worries.
Good.
We did get the stories
We got
again
that story.
from Dan as well. I interviewed Dan and Bill before I left. So we actually do have some
Okay,
good
good.
material
So we
from
did get that story, but the technology is one that you got to have the right, proper camera, lighting, sound, equipment, all that, and then also trying to get you get a lot of. I know for me, I have a tendency to sit down. I got a lot of stories in my head that I would like to tell. I've even done just as a proof of concept. I've done myself, and I sit down in front of a camera and I want to tell these stories, and I freeze. And I think that's extremely common. So getting an interviewer who's not just asking a set of pre-prepared questions, but basically getting a rapport built with the interviewee to get them comfortable enough so that they can actually just relax and act like they're talking over the backyard fence is really what we're trying to accomplish here. So I mean, from a interviewer standpoint, it's a different discipline than I think you're accustomed to. It's really, and I know Kevin, something you're good at. Ideally, what we're shooting for, we want to have a situation where we have an interviewer and interviewees face to face, and the camera off center, focused on the interviewee, so that the interviewee is not looking at the camera. That's our our best scenario. Now, when we have situations like this one, like you and me, well, let's say, well, for instance, we had a guy, I forget his name now, from Sri Lanka, who did reach out to interviews at Indefectible.org and said, I've got an incredible story to tell. And I heard his story and I was like, okay, wait a minute. We can't hold this for Indefectible. We got to get this out there now because it's such an incredible story. And he did. He came on the podcast and told the story. But now I can take that, outtakes from that interview that you had online and use that for Indefectible. And we probably will at some point because it's going to really fit into the rest of the fabric of everything really well. So if you're not able to be in a situation where you can have this formal interviewer situation face to face with the cameras and everything like that, we can do an interview kind of like we're doing here, where you meet up with Kevin, you meet up with me, and we get your story and we do it over Restream or whatever it is. And it's not the ideal, but I think it definitely will work for Indefectible.
Yeah, for sure. And I think again, don't be too afraid that let us know if you think, hey, maybe this is good enough. Send us an email. I mean, don't be afraid that my story is not great. I mean, who knows? I mean, the more we can pull from, the better. Doesn't mean for sure every single story is going to be published, as I'm sure everyone can understand. But I mean, to have them is definitely good, and to have the ideas at least is always a win. So please, if you have anything, I mean, I like these little miracles, I mean, because I think that's something that I've really thought about a lot the last few weeks, because I went to Loreto, the chapel where Our Lady grew up and was miraculously moved by angels from Nazareth to Italy. And so if you watch documentaries, a lot of people will say, oh, of course, angels didn't do that. It was moved by, they know scientifically now that the rocks and everything came from Nazareth. That's absolutely sure. They're sure the house was Mary's house in Nazareth. That's like scientifically proven, whatever you want to say. But of course, the question is, was it a miracle? No, because they can't admit to a miracle, of course, even the modern church. But I think that's really important, because it's one of the how do you say it? The teachings of our faith. The Catholic Church does say you do need to believe in the supernatural. Miracles do happen; they do exist, and they do happen even to you and me, or to this priest. Where they had a deer running alongside. And I think those are stories that I think help to strengthen our faith, help us to realize, okay, God does exist. God is looking out for us. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So if you've had those stories as well, let us know.
Yeah, and then that's really the message that we want to get down to future generations. I mean, that's our primary audience. Secondary audience is going to be those who are maybe discerning and looking at the situation in Rome and maybe looking for answers or whatnot. But for future generations who look back at this age of utter darkness, I mean, it's the darkest period perhaps in human history, other than maybe the time of the flood or whatnot. But never before has God's church turned on us. But you know what? God was still here with us the whole way. And the joy of the church and the sacraments stayed with us, and the calendar stayed with us, and the miracles and everything else were still here. And it was because of God's providence. It wasn't because I was something special, or you were something special, or our priests were, floating above the ground. We were all normal people, but it was God working through all these different people that make this story of the modern church incredible. And it's just an incredible story.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that yeah, for those who are wondering otherwise, how to help us out. And I think that it's one of those things. I know you have trips planned kind of all over the place. I know to Spokane, I think the
Yeah.
Oklahoma, you want to get down to Oklahoma at some point, to Arkansas. I mean, we've had people reach out and say, hey, we've got great stories. And we're working on it. It really is just it's a time consuming thing. It's hard to plan these things. We have normal lives. You and I both work jobs. We have normal. This is not our career. We do this totally as a hobby, if you want to call it that. We do it on the side.
Avocation.
Exactly. And I think that that's important to remember, that to please be patient with this. But if you have a way to help us out, if you want to help us out, send us an email. We'll
Mhm.
tell you how you can help us. I mean, we understand that not everyone has money, though. Yeah, money helps. It does. Money helps with equipment. It helps with gas. If you have extra money to send us, great, do it. But it's not the only thing. Obviously, prayers are number one. But there are many other ways. I know there are other things for this project, Dad. Talents that we're going to need. You
Mhm.
mentioned narration, but what are some of the others?
Okay, so we're gonna need one of the big ones, if we can, is interviewers. We do have one volunteer up in Minnesota who is, is accomplished and has done some interviews that have shown, I think, True Restoration. I forget what, at least one, and he's going to give it a try, and that's a big one. But that, like I said, that's a tough skill. But interviewees, that's a big one. Anybody who's got the stories, absolutely. And then another one we see a lot is interview leads, because I know that a lot of our priests have said, hey, I know a parish member in Oklahoma, or in Wisconsin, or whatever it is, and you really need to get with this person. We're starting to get a number of those leads, but obviously our ability to follow up on it is pretty rough. If unfortunately, like you said, I'm I have to work a 9 to 5 type of a job. If I was retired, I think we could just tour the country, and we could have this thing knocked out in 6 months, and it would be awesome. But
So if Mel Gibson is listening, or
yeah, Mel,
someone with
yeah,
no big deal. But if you want to donate
yeah,
a
if you
couple
take this on,
million or
that,
so,
or at least help us, that'd be awesome.
right.
Yeah,
No
but
worries.
right, but yeah. So another one that would be really cool, if anybody would be willing to volunteer as a character voice, and so let us know, if you have any accent or anything like that, because what we do want to do, and I think it's going to be a fun part of the project. The priest that you're talking about earlier, I forget his name again already, but
Normandin, Father
Norman
Normandin.
from Canada. Yeah. As we do the piece on him, which is, I think, probably our first real Indefectible vignette. We'll do some narration. We'll take his own words and probably read them back as part of this. And if we had a character voice, somebody who was from Canada would be ideal, who could read this, a male voice, and incorporate that in. That would be another really, really good thing to line up. Some other jobs that we're looking for: photo editors. I would really like to get a repository of photos out on the internet somewhere that we can go to different parishes. We can find, here Terry Checkus is really kind of our local documentarian, and I know, I think Anne-Marie Netzel up in Spokane, and if somebody could coordinate all that and set up a website and work with these different local photo editors, and get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos for us to choose from in terms of making the documentaries, that would be fantastic. That would be just a huge help, because I know for me, when I'm putting together post-production on any video, getting photos together is usually the hardest part of the project.
Well, and people, because people don't realize too how dangerous it is with copyright issues.
Right.
And I mean, if you
Right.
take someone's picture and don't attribute it and then make money from it, you can get fined. I know a guy who's getting fined. I think it's something like $20,000 or something. I mean, something
Right.
like absolutely ridiculously absurd because they think they can, and part of it, I think people even do that on purpose. They just take a picture and then put it online in hoping for people
Hoping.
to break a copyright rule. But I think that's something to really remember too. That's such a great point, Dad, that I think literally just go find a nice church in your town and take some really nice close-ups and save it to this directory, because people like Mario Dirksen, of Novus Ordo Watch or WM Review, or all sorts of productions, including us, could really use
Oh,
copyright-free Catholic pictures. I mean, if someone's
yes.
in Rome, take a picture of everything and upload it
Right.
to the site. That's a great idea, and it'll be so valuable to have. So that's a really valuable thing. So our photographers out there, especially, boy, would that be nice.
That would be awesome. Yeah, and it's really more the organizer, somebody who maybe
Right,
is good with social media, somebody
right.
who is a good networker and things like that. We can even help with the technology part of it. So that's another one. Another one that I think might interest some people, because this is real background. This is not going to put you in front of the camera or anything like that, but we're going to need historians. Somebody who can take the story. So we're currently launching a storyboarding effort. So we're going to go through these different epochs of the church, the forming, storming, norming, the different eras of the church since Vatican II, and we're putting together a storyboard. So here are the different compelling stories of the time. Here are some of the compelling characters. Here's the different things we kind of like to ideally build into Indefectible. Once we have a storyboard, that gives the interviewers a little bit of substance to work from, to know, okay, here's who we can, here's some questions, some leading questions to try to give some form to the interviews. But for anybody who's a historian who would be willing to go through, I don't know, documents of Archbishop Took or Bishop Delorier or Father Francis Fenton and the Athanasian, go through some of those old newsletters, or the Four Marks or the Reign of Mary, and look for good material that supports the storyboard. That's another role that I think we would be really interested in. And I'll tell you what, if this is another really cool thing. Ever since one of the things that really kicked off our history piece of this, again, Bill Meese, God bless his soul, had he was really ahead of his time when it came to videoing and archiving and whatnot. And back then, back in the 80s, you literally had to rent VHS equipment, and it was clunky and it was loud, and the priest had to be okay with it. And it was a pain to do, but he did it, and he passed that down to us. And it turned into the Father Dennis series, which has been phenomenally successful on the podcast. But since then, we've had other people from Omaha here who have said, "Oh, I've got all my stuff, and I don't listen to it anymore." And here it is. And so now we've got a shed full of old VHS tapes and audio tapes and whatnot that I haven't even been able to go through. So if we had somebody who was an intern or a retiree or wanted to go through all of this old material, I mean, we even have we have a interview that Bishop Pivarunas did on a local talk show right after he moved to Omaha, which is just incredibly good. And somebody wanted to go through and find good usable material amongst that, plethora of raw material. That would be another fantastic contribution to the whole thing. And then I think that the other thing we're looking for is what I would call a graphics director. And I think from watching Catholic Family Podcast, you've got a pretty good idea of what our capabilities are graphically. We're certainly we're not professionals. We do okay. We know how to do Premiere Pro and transitions and use graphics and things like that, but we're far and away not top. We're not Mel Gibson, right? We're not a professional Hollywood studio. And so if you're somebody who has the talent and knows Adobe After Effects or Premiere Pro, because we do use the Adobe suite, and you could help us raise our game, whether it's through training, whether it's through doing a couple examples that I could then take and dissect and and look at and say, oh, wow, okay, now I understand how you do. Now I get it. And that would be another incredibly valuable thing. So, that's pretty much, I think there's probably other things, even if you brainstorm, hey, I've got another idea about how I can help.
Mm-hmm.
Just let us know, because it really, this is not meant to be us doing a documentary. This is meant to be a collaborative effort of all of us that we can put together into video form and leave for future generations to say, how do we survive these dark times? And if we can do that collaboratively, it's going to take some time. Be sure of that, but I think it can be a really incredible effort.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that we can't offer too much because we don't
Yeah,
make much. We make
we're not making any
it's not a
money. Yeah,
money. But I think that again, I think that's kind of the cool thing about it, that as a project from all and for all, in a way, for the future, and trying to pass this on to future generations. I think it is. I think in a way, you can look at it as part of the fabric of the tradition of the church. Now, obviously, we
right.
can go wrong. We can say wrong things. So I don't want to speak too highly of it. But I think that passing on the tradition, passing on the faith by word of mouth, and I guess now by video, I think that is an extremely important thing, and that's how our faith has stayed alive for thousands of years. And I think that that's an important thing to remember, an important thing to think. Hey, we can be a part of this and help out in this. So anything you can do. And again, if you want to email, again, interviews at indefectible.org. You can also email me at kevin89davis@gmail.com. That's more for the general podcast. The podcast as a whole is I guess more of my baby. Indefectible is definitely more of Dad's baby. Of course, with everything we work on it together,
We all
and we
share.
share
Yeah.
everything. But I think that if you have an overall issue or topic, you can send it to me as well at kevin89davis@gmail.com. But no, please help us out. Whatever you have. I think we're excited for it, but also ready for the long haul. And again, like we said, you've got some
Right.
interviews kind of preparing, but really it's over the year. It's not like, okay, we're gonna finish this documentary by November. We just don't really know.
Right.
We'll see. I
We
mean,
don't know. Yeah.
and as you said, if we get a lot of help, then who knows? I mean, maybe we could
Yeah.
by November. I mean, it could be.
Yeah, we don't know, right? And I think that we have a trip. We're blessed that we've got our youngest son William is in the minor seminary in Idaho, and it's worked out for us to basically take a 2-week trip up to Spokane in Idaho in late May, early June. And so our intent up there is to use that time to start doing a bunch of interviews. And I know Father Philip is the pastor up in Spokane. He's kind of been starting to till the soil and find some people who might be interested. And we've got to work with Reverend Mother to see if we can work, talk with the sisters up there. But that to me is kind of ground zero of where a lot of this started with the Blue. We still have people alive who were part of the Blue Army. That was kind of the original foundation upon which the entire movement ended up getting built, and people who were lay brothers and sisters in the early days of Mount St. Michael's, and I mean it's just there are some of the stories that I've heard up there are just incredible. So that's, I think, where we're going to start. We're hoping, I've got some high hopes for getting some really good interviews while we're up there in June, and then from there we'll just kind of see where it goes.
No, absolutely. No, I think that sounds good. And I think otherwise, I mean, we got a lot of exciting things, I think, going on with the podcast. As everyone knows, we took a bit of a break lately, and things kind of have their ebbs and flows, as I hear
Right.
work going on somewhere in the house. Sorry for that. But we also have live shows planned coming up. We have a live show planned talking kind of on this similar topic, kind of an Indefectible live show,
Yeah.
in a way, talking about some of the heroes of the Catholic Church over the last 60 years, and already have some interest from some of the clergy talking about Father Cicada, Bishop Dolan,
Right.
Bishop Gerard Delorier. I mean, different, even perhaps Archbishop Lefebvre. We'll see. I mean, it'll be really
Right.
interesting to see, what these people have to say about these clergymen, and I imagine women as well that have had such an impact. That will focus more just on the clergy, while I think Indefectible itself will be more kind of spread out throughout the laity and the clergy telling that stories. But there's a lot happening. So I hope people stick with us, people support us in whatever way you can. And I love it when I get emails from people saying, hey, I have this idea for how to contribute content or whatever. That's fantastic. I mean, that's so awesome that people are interested in helping. And I mean, it's really every little thing. As Dad knows better than I do. Dad's kind of the programmer. I'm kind of the annoying, I don't even know, the talent, I suppose. Who's like, yeah, exactly. I'm just kind of like that. Okay. Dad's like, okay, so what's our plan for the week? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
God always provides.
No,
even when we're not putting stuff out, God always provides.
Yeah, it's real. We'll have days where like we don't have any content, and someone will email me like, hey, you want to have a podcast? Okay, sure, let's go. It's a cool thing.
Before I forget, I've got to give one nice shout out here, and I'm not going to name this person because I don't want to embarrass her, but there's at least one of our viewers who goes through and watches our videos, and every single video she watches, she comments and she puts either a prayer, hands in prayer, or a heart. And I can't tell you how gratifying that is, and how much my heart, just races every time I see this person in the comment section with the folded hands or the heart or whatever it is. It's beautiful. And I think if more people would do that, just give us a like, give us a hands in prayer. Just let us know you watched the video and you liked it. That is it's incredibly heartwarming. It's also good for the channel though, because those types of comments trigger the algorithms and help the place to grow and help us to get the word out there.
No, it's a great point. And I think I should definitely know her name by now, because as you say, I see her every day. But you know who we're talking about. You know who you are. I want you to please send me send to Kevin89Davis@gmail.com. Send me your address. I want to send you something in the mail because I have something special for you. I had that on my mind before, Dad. It's funny you bring in the background. But no, send me your address because I have something pretty neat that I want to send you, because we really do appreciate that, because it shows you're a loving member of the podcast group, I suppose, which is
right.
Pretty awesome.
Which is awesome. Yeah, and that to me, I mean, there's so many different ways we can contribute. That is really truly one of the best ways. Just comment. Just tell us you liked the video. Tell us you watched it, and and that means a lot.
Well, and a huge since we're doing shout outs, I think I do also have to shout out huge shout out to Eric, who does the readings every week. He does 3 readings every week from the liturgical year. I don't know if anyone understands what that means. I mean, and I know he often takes his weekend evenings, at least part of them, to record these. There was Good Friday. I believe it was almost 1 hour long. Right. So huge props to him. He's got a bunch of kids. Really, seriously, it's amazing. And it really spiritually beneficial to all that get to listen to it. So huge thanks to Eric. Huge thanks to CJ. CJ is a big help. CJ is always there for us. CJ and Dan. I mean, these guys that I just sent. I say, hey guys, can you do this? And they're just boom, they do it. Even if I'm super annoying and I'm not. I mean, I know I drive these guys crazy because well, our tech issues are legendary, but they save us. Holly and Mandy, they are so consistent with their Thursday shows. It's beautiful. We love their content, and not only do I love their content, I love reliability. I mean, it's something that I mean, I understand fully that people can't contribute, content if they don't have the time, they don't have the ideas, personalities. That's totally fine. But I really appreciate it not only when people have the idea, but they have the reliability.
They follow through. I can tell you,
even if it's hard, they're like, hey, this may be hard, but we're going to do a show this week. I love it.
Your mom and I are working on. I mean, we've been tossing around the idea of a show dedicated towards parenting that we do once a week or once every couple of weeks or months, a month, or whatever. And it is just hard to sit down and find the time to do it. And so, for Holly and Manny, for you and Matt, getting through and doing that every week. And it to me, those shows I mean, they're not just reliable; they add so much character. They add so much depth. I mean, between the show on Monday that's a little bit more politically oriented, and the one on Thursday that's more geared towards women, and then the shows we do on the saints and everything else. It's just this diversity that we have on the show. This is what it's like to be Catholic.
Yeah.
It's not just throwing stones and talking about how horrible Francis. Oh, Francis did this week, and Francis did that. You know, yeah, that's important. It's something we got to pay attention to. But it's these types of shows, to me, that really show what the faith is all about.
Well, and we do. It's another really exciting thing. I do have a project in the works with, for sure, one priest I already have on. I got to talk to the other ones about it. Father Geckel, I see you on the comments, so I'm coming after you. I know the priests, they always hear this and like, oh boy, what am I going to get roped into? But we want to do a series on the basics of the faith and of the Mass. As my camera dies, I'm still here, guys. Don't worry, my camera just died. Of course. And what was I saying about tech? It's always something. Something always has to break. But we're going to do a series on the basics of the faith and of the Mass, where we'll have priests to come on and just talk briefly about one or two subject matters. So we'll have hopefully like 15 minutes how to make a good confession. Now, I understand people have heard these sermons before. I'm sure you've heard plenty. What I want to differentiate that is your questions. Father, you should be afraid. In the comments, sorry guys. But what would be great if we have your questions or your comments. What do you want to know about making a good confession? Because then it makes it so that the podcast isn't just the priest coming on and having giving another sermon, which would also be good, of course. But if they can also actually answer your questions, I think that's going to make it much more fitting to our to the platform that we have. So please, again, if you have questions about some of the basics of the faith, about confession, communion, or about prayer, those are the first three shows I want to do. How to make a good confession, a good communion, and how to pray, and it includes mental prayer, children praying, etc. Send me an email, kevin89davis@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, Kevy Gillikin. That's KEVVYGILLIKIN. I know that's a little long and confusing, but I'm on there as well. So yeah, I mean, be a part of this. I think that's what we like the most is having a group effort. I think that's really the channel has grown into something I never imagined. I mean, truly, when I first started it, I mean, Father Geckel could tell. I mean, he was one of the first guests to come on, but partly because Father Geckel is a good friend of mine who I've known for many, many years, and he was just kind enough to come on a show with me before that there was anything known about it. And step by step, it's kind of grown into 4,000 subscribers, which is awesome and it's beautiful. But I think that like the best thing about that is that it's grown to be really like almost like a family. It's become like a society of its own where we can really do this together, and that's really exciting.
Tell your story about when you were in Italy recently.
This was fantastic. So we went to this little tiny parish in Italy, in Rimini, and when we were there, I think there were maybe 20 people, 5 people. Cute little church. Very nice priest who we spoke to briefly afterwards. He didn't speak a whole lot of English, but he helped to translate. Member of the IMBC. I think he was ordained by Archbishop Lefebvre. Anyway, so we walk out of church, and of course, we're in Rimini, Italy, middle of nowhere, Italy. And this guy just comes up to me, and he comes up and he shakes my hand and he says, "Hey, I love your podcast." I was just like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. That's an amazing thing. And that's, just out of nowhere to be friends with someone, to kind of have that in common. It's awesome. I really love it. And I think it shows again, what we can accomplish. And I think I've got a podcast coming out soon. I just recorded it right before the show about magnanimity and how we need to strive for great things and strive for not just being meek. Meekness is a good thing, but not just being kind of these, hiding in the darkness. We're going to let life happen to us. I think we really need to, especially men, need to step up and be great, do great things, build great things. And that's what we're trying, little steps at a time. And we fail many times, but I think that's our goal. And we hope that you guys will help us, really, not just watch us. I mean, please help us do it.
Right. Exactly. So it's been a great run.
Awesome. Cool. Dad, you got any last comments before we go?
No, we will, like I said, we'll have, I think, our first trial balloons of Indefectible coming up here within the next few weeks or so. What I want you to keep an eye on, okay, and I'm going to let you be a part of this journey, because it's a journey for me too. That as we go each time, I'm going to do better in terms of adding some graphical components, adding some music, adding some, and please, one of the things that people do really well in this community is, if you have something you don't like, you let us know. If you have something you like, let us know. So as you see these new Indefectible shorts, I guess you can call them shorts, let us know what you think. Hey, you could, I didn't like your lighting. I didn't like your background music. I didn't like the way you told your story, or I did like this, or I did like that, because that's what's going to grow, and that's what's going to evolve over time. And so the way I like to explain it is I feel a little bit like a sculptor, where we've got this incredible, unique, huge piece of marble that we're working. And as a sculptor, we need to bring the sculpture out. And we've got a vague idea of what we want that sculpture to look like right now. But as it is, we don't quite know exactly what it is, nor do I necessarily have the skills at this point to be the master sculptor, but we're going to work towards that, with all of the talent and all the passion that we have, and get to the point where we can create that sculpture with the final product, which will be who knows how long from now. And we'll have have made it a journey along the way. But that's kind of the goal, is to get that final sculpture to be something great that we can pass down to future generations.
Awesome. Well, and as someone mentioned in the comments, we so desperately need Catholic content, Catholic media, and it's something we preach on a lot on this channel. And so again, if anyone can do it, I mean, Father Zepeda over at the Catholic Wire is a great example of just spending so much time and so much effort in creating just good Catholic material. And I know very well that Father also needs help. I mean, he has, talk about big plans. I mean, you want to talk about someone with big plans. Our plans are pretty minuscule compared to Father Zepeda's. His plans are awesome. They're huge. He's another one. If you don't want to help us, go help Father Zepeda, because his content is also incredible and he has huge ideas. But it's just a perfect example that there's so much to do, and we need more help. We need more people to offer whatever they can. And again, I'm not saying money. I mean, literally, if it means photocopying books, I think that's so important. I think we need to create children's books. I think that's so important. These types of things that I mean, if you think about it, I know there's issues, creating Catholic material, because we don't have an imprimatur. So you have to be really careful. But if you have the advice of your priest, and if you do something really basic, or even if it's not Catholic, if it's just moral, boy, we got to build, we have to make, we have to create, because I think that's the time we're in now in our faith, and let's be magnanimous.
And I look somebody like Father Zepeda, who is a monster talent when it comes. I mean, the stuff he puts together is so extraordinary. I've seen some of his videos, and it's like, I don't even know how you do that, Father. And I know a couple of his tools, but to the extent that we can help him, all of us can help him to use his precious time, because I mean, obviously, as a priest, and his priest duties have to come first. But
with a big parish,
and he's got a big parish, so he's got very, very precious time. But to the extent we can help him use his precious time to do what he does best, and use that talent, that creative talent, to do creative things. And we can take some of the burden off him of, I don't know if it's maintaining the website or whatever it is, else that he has to do, that's just basically grunt work. Take some of the grunt work away from him. That's how we become great.
Absolutely. And I think that again, contact us, guys. Be a part of this. Be a part of what we want to grow, because we'll grow a lot faster, and we'll accomplish these things a lot faster, and maybe even maybe it's not even possible without your help. There's been a lot of these things that if we didn't have the help of Mandy and Holly. Corbin and CJ Holly, all these guys who've stepped in, Mary Kate, tons of stuff, right? People creating stuff. I mean, give it a shot. I really, really recommend it, and let's see what we can do together.
Yeah.
Awesome. Dad, thank you very much. Everyone who's been part of the commentary, thank you very much for being here and for joining us. It's been fun. We like the live shows.
Mhm.
It's a little scary sometimes when you talk about some subject matter.
Yeah.
So that's why we kind of went away from it. But I think we're going to try to get a little bit back to it with some of these guys. I hope again with Mario Dirksen to do another one. And so
Yeah,
stick with
the
us.
show with
We'll be back to
Mario,
this.
the show with Mario turned into a party in the comment section, and that to me was one of the best parts of it. So I mean, there is a place for these live shows, and especially the comment that start coming back is awesome.
Well, and last thing, and I know I've had a lot of people reach out and say they want to meet all these people who they know on social media or on YouTube. I think again it's a good idea. We tried it once. It kind of worked, but it's an interesting idea to do a Skype meeting or a meeting here on Restream to just just meet each other and talk about I don't even know, top history, faith, our lives. If people are interested in that, let me know. I've heard a couple people say that already, but send me an email. Maybe I'll set up a Skype date when we can all meet and just have a chat, and maybe if it's in the evening, I'll drink a Bavarian beer and we'll have a nice Feierabend, as we say here in Germany. So, Dad,
Yep.
thank you very much. Sorry for the rambling. That the hardest thing about shows is the beginning and the
Right,
end.
wrapping it up. Yep, exactly.
Wrapping it up. But we'll wrap it up there. God bless, Dad. God bless everyone in the comment section, and please say a prayer for the channel and for our families and everybody who is involved with the Catholic Family Podcast.
God bless.